Hey watch friends, today we're going to be taking a look at an upcoming offering from the microbrand Selten, and this is their Salvage Bronze series. This one's coming to Kickstarter at the end of May of 2023. I don't have an exact date as of the time of recording, but it'll be shortly after I publish this one. You might not recognize the logo even if you've seen past Selten models, because they actually changed it up. We previously looked at the Series 00, and I'll bring that one in for comparison. I do want to mention up front for administrative matters, this is a prototype. While it's loaned into the channel, you might have seen the paid promotion banner. They do intend to send a production one in, so I of course want to be transparent about that. So let's go ahead and dive into the specs on this prototype offering here, and we'll check out a lot of different things. In particular, you're going to want to see this outdoor footage and various other aspects, because this thing comes to life when the light hits it just right, and we'll talk about why. For the warranty, this comes standard with a 1-year warranty. The case, measured roughly from the 2 o'clock to 8 o'clock position, is coming in spot on at 39 millimeters. The bezel is for all intents and purposes flush, and I'm getting 39 millimeters there as well. The lugs are 20 millimeters, so nice and strap change versatile there. The lug to lug is only coming in at 47 millimeters, so again, plenty wrist versatile, but if you have a larger wrist despite the 39 millimeter size, it fills it up pretty decently. The thickness. This is on calipers coming in at 13.7 millimeters. However, that is including this sapphire crystal that we'll look at momentarily. Without the crystal, it's only coming in on my calipers at 12.2 millimeters. And in both cases, I think it actually wears a little slimmer than it denotes there, so not too bad at all. As for the crystal, this is, as I mentioned, a sapphire crystal. It does have a very slight doming to it, but the main thing you're going to notice is it does have that box edge. But this is a double dome sapphire, and it does have inner AR coating. As far as the movement, this is beating away with a Miyota 9039. If you're not familiar with the 9039, most likely you've seen or heard of the 9015. This is essentially the same one, but in the no-date variation. So it's going to have all the good features you'd want there. It's a higher beat at 28,800 beats per hour, has hacking, hand winding, around 42-hour power reserve, all that kind of good stuff. As far as the water resistance, you can see at the 6 o'clock position, this is coming in with 200 meters or 20 atmospheres of water resistance, plenty I think for the dive styling that it is. The weight on this stock included strap that we'll talk about further, this is coming in at 102.8 grams, so not too bad there at all. With bronze, you always do get a little more heft, but that being said, I think this is still nicely balanced and pretty lightweight. So now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and take a deeper dive into the model itself. There's a lot you're going to want to hear about with this one. First, for the colors. This actually comes in 8 different color options. You have the teal blue that we're looking at today. There's additionally a green version, a red version, an orange version, a tan version, a brown version, a black version, and one that I'm calling a bronze version. Each of those you'll see the real names on at their site. That being said, all of these are going to have the same basic characteristics as far as what the composition is. They're a sandwich dial layout, as you can clearly see from the overall aesthetic, but there's a lot of unique features to this particular one. The main thing is these dials are actually copper-based dials, so the dial itself is made of copper. That coloration you see is actually hand-applied patina. They use a unique technique to hand apply this to achieve those colors across the board. So what you're going to find is every single one of these dials, much like a mineral dial or a meteorite dial, every one is going to vary. So yes, you have the color lineup and you're going to have consistency there, but the actual pattern itself is going to vary, which I personally think is such a cool aesthetic. Additionally, you might have noticed this has somewhat of a 3D effect as well as the glossiness to it, despite the patina, and that's because it actually has a sapphire applied over that sandwich dial, so you have a sapphire sandwich going on as well. The sapphire crystal across the dial does have AR coating applied to it as well, which was an excellent call. As you look at the rest of the dial, you will see that there's printing applied across the board. You have the logo at the 12 o'clock position. At the 6 o'clock, you have automatic, and that is in white, and then you have keeping in the old radium coloration to 200 meters below that. As you move outward, you'll notice the markers themselves have a nice border around them. I think that really helps for legibility, and additionally, I think it adds visual pop and appeal as well. And then as you go out to the very edge, you can see it does have an applied chapter ring, which has your prominent 5-minute, but it does have your individual hashes in between as well, so excellent legibility there also. Shifting over to the hardware, the handset on this is what I would describe as skeletonized oval shape. It has a neat application of a mix of polishing that you see primarily on both your hour and minute. However, it does have a very subtle and tasteful brush strip down the middle. it's largely broken up by the loom. However, when the light hits it just right, it gives you some of that light play that you oftentimes get from faceting, and I really think that that's a great call there. Additionally, for the second hand, which is a much more delicate hand there, that one is full brushed, which again, I think is excellent contrast with that shinier dial, makes it very easy to pick up, and it also adds for excellent contrast against those mostly polished for your hour and minute hand as well. So I think that's excellent. As far as the loom itself, the loom on this is Super Luminova, and it is, as I mentioned earlier for coloration, an old radium. As you're going to notice here, it glows well overall, and I do think it performs well also. However, old radium is never going to have that pop or that endurance like you'd get from a C3. So it's not one I'd call a loom monster, but I think that it's plenty adequate for the application, though certainly would never mind it being kicked up some. Shifting over to the bezel. The bezel on this, as we already looked at, is flush to the case. In keeping with the dive style, this is a 120 click unidirectional bezel, and we'll listen to the action momentarily. As far as the actual bezel insert, you can see that this does have a nice slope to it, which I think adds a great transition from the edge up to that box edge crystal, and it helps to keep the box edge crystal from protruding too much there. So I think that's a nice touch. The edge itself is a coin edge there, and it's a very traditional coin edge, almost looks like it flipped over a quarter to grab a hold of that. The bezel insert is a matte ceramic, and then you can see it does have the markers applied all the way around. You've got the 12 o'clock triangular style pip there. Then you have your individual hashes up through your 15. You have your numerals and your even at your 10-minute increments there. So a pretty traditional layout and configuration. And as we already saw, it does have loom applied all the way around there too. As far as the case itself is a nice, smooth, traditional shape. You can see it doesn't really have any cut-ins or anything along those lines, but it has a nice curvature going down to it. So you can see it does have the downturned lugs and just overall a nice, smooth, flowing, traditional shape to that. The principal finishing is going to be a horizontal, so a front to rear brushing that's applied. You can see this is already picking up some patina, so you do have a little bit of that obscured, and over time, of course, it'll be even more obscured, but it was very nicely applied straight out of the box here, but I'm already giving my character to this. The downturned lugs do come pretty close to being flush with the case back, so that's, I think, well done there. It doesn't get the flying saucer effect or anything along those lines, so that's well done. It does have chamfers at the top and the bottom, and to be honest with you, I'm not certain whether these were a high polish to begin with or not. However, with it picking up the patina, as is usually the case with bronze, either way, it's all going to kind of blend in together, but I do think it's a nice accent there. Shifting over to the lugs, you can see a fairly traditional lug shape there, and then in between the lugs, you can see this is pretty heavily curved, and we'll talk about that further as we go through the video. Over on the 3 o'clock side, you can see there is no crown guard for this, which again, I think gives it that traditional look as well. Speaking of the crown is coming in at 7.3 millimeters, and as you'd expect for a dive style watch, it is a screw-in configuration. The patterning perfectly matches that bezel, and you can see that this actually not only has a coin application there, but it's what I would call a split coin. So that has a line down the middle, so it actually keeps in that thin aesthetic too, as opposed to just having just one broad coin cut out there. I think this actually visually perfectly integrates. Really like that touch. Additionally, you do see the carrying over of the 12 o'clock logo is applied, signed on this crown as well, and that's nicely milled in. Shifting over to the case back. The case back on this, again, as you'd expect for a dive style construction, is a screw-in case back. It has your keyholes on the outer edge, not as well integrated as some. I personally like those inlaid holes, but I think in the overall aesthetic and layout of this, I think it works well. In the middle, though, you're going to notice that this has a very artistic application of the case back. They call this the Warrior Mermaid, which I think is a really cool accent there. It's a very artistic case back. It has a lot of depth to it. It is very three-dimensional, and it's actually supposed to be potentially even kicked up on the production version, but there's no hot spots or anything along those lines. Very smooth, very well applied. And I think that's true for the entirety of this case back. It has nice clean text application. It went relatively minimalist for that, which I think was a good call there, so it doesn't distract from the artistry in the middle. And then it has a nice mix of texture with principally brushing on the perimeter, and then you do have blasting, as well as a somewhat polish on the mermaid itself. Really not what I would call polished, but kind of a satiny texture and finish there. So nice contrast across the board. Shifting over to the strap rather. The strap here is tapered, so it comes at, of course, 20 millimeters at the lugs, and then tapers down at the buckle to 17.4 millimeters. The strap is an FKM rubber strap, and it has what I would call like a rounded or a curved waffle pattern to it. So again, not that it's you worry about sharp edges with rubber, but it is nice and smooth there. Everything just feels very cleanly machined out of that and very nicely manufactured. I like that a lot. On the back, it does have quick release spring bars, so if you do decide to change that around, that's no problem either. Additionally, you do have a hex pattern that's on the back, so that'll help with sweat and breathability and those kinds of things. So I think that's a good call. Shifting over to the buckle on this, do note this is not the production version. The production version, I'm not certain whether that will come with signed application or not, but that will actually be a full bronze construction. So that will patina just like the case itself, and I think that's excellent. The rest of the texture on the strap, you can see it has a nice framing and border as it goes around, as well as reinforcements for the holes, which I think is a really great touch there. The tail is kind of a flat construction there, but a nice taper to that as well, so no problems getting that through the keeper. The biggest thing that I have to point out with this is the pliability is insane. It's hard to translate on camera, but you can get an idea as to just how malleable this is. This is probably the softest and most supple. It feels really almost like silicone, but without having the feel of silicone. So it feels like FKM rubber as far as this, but the pliability is more in keeping with silicone. It is incredible in that respect. So I think that's extremely well done. Very pleased with this strap. I think that's excellent. All right, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, let's go ahead and bring in some comps, and for different reasons. First, naturally, I want to bring in the other Selten that we've looked at. This is the Selten Series 00. This one was with the day-night configuration, as you can see at the 6 o'clock position. Very different aesthetic for these two overall. This one, as you can see, originally has with having a fixed bezel, does have a larger profile, or a larger presence, I should say, to that, versus this dive style where you have the bezel shrinking down the actual dial. But there's an idea of the aesthetic. You can see at the 12 o'clock, they went with the Selten banner, which I know not everybody was crazy about, but here's what their original logo looked like. You can see the sign there. And I personally, really actually don't mind either of them. So that one is a little bit of kind of an adaptation of the original for the logo there, but that gives you an idea for that one. Next up, this is one from the teased images that I've seen come up a lot. And here it is, you can see this is the Tusino shellback. And certainly, when you look at the sandwich layout, when you look at the style of the marker cuts, they're similar. They are certainly reminiscent of each other, can't deny that. But when you look at the finer details of this, very different for the actual bezel itself, not only the mat, but actually the layout, the configuration, not having hashes all the way around. Then when you look at the, of course, handsets, completely different across the board. The perimeter with the chapter ring application is different. Obviously, the dials are completely different aesthetically. But even going down to the markers, you can notice instead of having round, this is more similar actually to the Dietrich that we've seen at Microbrand as well, where they went with a little more of a rectangular. So personally, yeah, I mean, it's a sandwich style dial, so certainly there is similarity there. But I very much think that they are unique. And you can see, sizing-wise, the shellback is a little bit larger in overall presence too. All right, next up, this is another bronze here. This is the Zelos Swordfish 40, and this is the bronze with their optional bronze bracelet as well, just to give you an idea. And this is kind of what you can expect as it patinas, get that coloration change there. And I think that's really going to go quite nicely with all of these patina dials. I really like that aesthetic as well. So this just gives you a teaser there. And again, a little bit smaller of a presence on this one at the 39 millimeters. I think it does wear close to a 40, but as you can see, it is definitely on the somewhat smaller side. For larger wristed folks, as we'll talk about, might not find this to be as ideal. All right, so now that we have the basic specs out of the way, have a better feel for the watch and what it's like to live with. Actually, I forgot to give you your bezel action. Let's go ahead and check that out. So there is our click. So for the bezel action, it's relatively crisp. It's a nice tactile click to that. As we go through, you can hear that. It has very minimal backplay. The alignment is pretty solid. You can see it just kind of nests in the place, and then once it does, no real wiggle to that. So I think that's pretty well dialed in. Sorry, we're getting that out of order there. All right, so now that we have that, let's go ahead and transition over and close things out with my personal view of the positives, some critiques, as well as the overall summary. First, for the positives. This one, I love the dials. I think that it is absolutely amazing. You get completely one-of-a-kind dials. The application that they did with this patina, I've never seen anything like it. You know, this teal blue, this is fairly uncommon to begin with, but some of the other colors that they get, they're somehow able to extract reds and oranges and all kinds of things. absolutely amazing that they did so, and that's really, really cool to have that copper actual patina dial, especially with a bronze case where you actually get to pick up the patina on the case too. So I love that aspect. Legibility is surprisingly actually pretty darn good. So we'll talk about this a little more, but the overall contrast with the old radium, with the polishing accents, I've never really had any issues making this out. Similarly, the hands come right out to the chapter ring, nice, clear, legible for the chapter ring itself. So I think at least on this dial coloration, fantastic. The finishing has really been quite good. For the price point, and this one at the super early bird price is coming in at $459. For the price point, with having a sapphire dial, with having, of course, ceramic accents, having an artistic case back, having the hand patina dials, all of those kind of things you're getting with it, I think it's pretty competitively priced. But the biggest thing is the fit and finish. I mean, it's pretty excellent. Just like with the original Selten that we looked at, the Series 00, the finishing, the brushing, all of those accents, everything is just nicely done. So I think you're getting a lot for your money. And then case back, I have to say, this is personally one of my favorite fixed casebacks that I've seen, or casebacks in general for that matter. And actually, let's bring in that Series 00. So they had a really impressive caseback, that rotor as well. I loved that on the Series 00. But then with going with a fixed caseback on this one, I think they did an absolutely fantastic job, and I like seeing them mix that up. So that's excellently done. But as far as some of the critiques, first, I said we would revisit the case shape. As you can see here, there definitely is a pretty big gap between this. I think this would absolutely, it's such a well-finished watch overall. I think this would really benefit. I would love to see this exact same strap, but fitted. Get those curved ends to that, where that actually nests perfectly up against the case. That would be fantastic. I just think it would finish this off so much better. I'm really hoping that that's a change that they make for production. That would be definitely a chef's kiss there. The strap length. You might have noticed on my 6.5-inch wrist, I'm somewhere, I sometimes wear it on the next to last hole, and sometimes I'm on the last hole. So that's important to be aware of, despite the fact that this is a 39mm watch, not a huge presence, decent lug to lug. The wrist versatility on this strap, you can't get a lot smaller than 6.4-inch wrist. You might be able to get down, 6.5-inch wrist rather. You might be able to get down to like 6.4, maybe 6.3, but you're going to run out of holes there for that, so you're going to have to change out the strap. But again, 20mm, so not that big of a deal there. The loom, do just want to mention, as I said in the loom footage, I think it performs adequately, but you're never going to have the pop and loom monster effect that you do with like a C3 or something along those lines out of old radium. So certainly not really a critique per se, just something to be aware of. And then finally, again, not really critique section, but do want to mention it here, and that is the reflection. The reflection on this, with having, I should say, a sapphire dial, it is a very glossy dial. As we've seen through footage throughout this, it can certainly pick up reflection. That's part of actually what allows that dial to pop and to get it to come to life. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing, but it is something to be aware of. Like I said, not really a critique. I think the AR actually does its job well. And similarly, I think the legibility is excellent across all conditions, but it is something to be aware of, especially as you're trying to set up the camera here. Like me, I had to get the lighting just right to make sure that this came through with enough pop without having that reflection. So finally, where does that leave us? We already talked about the sizing. Depending on your wrist size, you've seen what this looks like. I think at my 6.5-inch wrist or smaller, limited to the strap, it's going to be excellent. I think you can go considerably larger depending on your preferences as well, but do be aware it is a little bit on the smaller side. But the overall summary for me is this dial by itself, to me, is well worth the $459 cost of admission there. I think the dials are fantastic. I love the patina style. I love the colorations that they've achieved. But the rest of the watch, I think, is just an added bonus. Love the artistic caseback. Love the overall finishing. So I really don't think you can go wrong with this. If you're thinking about picking one up, do stay tuned. Like I said, I will have down in the description a link to their Kickstarter campaign. Check that out. It'll be dropping soon. So there you have it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, if you did like it, please tap that like button. Drop a comment, let me know what you think. Which color is your favorite of the 8 options that you have? And finally, if you haven't done so already, please tap that subscribe button. Thanks for watching.